Welcome to Lifting Your Spirit, a monthly broadcast in which we interview people about their spiritual lives and how they suggest to help others lift their spirits. I'm Reverend Grossman, interfaith minister. I'm director of spiritual services for Constellation Hospice here in Newburyport, and I offer spiritual coaching virtually on a donation basis.
And I'm Ted Jones, a meditation teacher at North Shore Insight Meditation Center.
Our show is based on the four following principles. 1, everyone is spiritual. Sometimes we are conscious and active in our spiritual lives, sometimes not, but we're still spiritual.
2, there are many ways to lift your spirit, not only through religious practices, but also through nature, art, human relationship, and service to others, to name only a few.
And each person's path is unique and may change in small or large ways over time.
It's important to respect your spiritual journey, trusting that one step can lead to another, and to respect other people's unique spiritual journeys as well, regardless of how different they may be from your own. We're not here to convince you of the benefits of any particular approach. Rather, we're just offering food for thought.
We're very pleased to have Reverend Varney with us today, pastor at the Belleville Church here in Newburyport. I've enjoyed interaction with Ross over the years. He has come to the synagogue many times as an example of his interest in interfaith, and I'm looking forward to our conversation today. We would like to start with asking you about your spiritual journey through life.
Okay. Well, I picked up on what you said right then about it changes over life. That was, I like that. Because, anyway, yeah, to think about what I was like as a young pastor and what I'm like now, I know there's changes, a lot of changes. Some of that has to do with what I'm called to do, which is speak and preach. And anyway, when I was young, I would, just starting out some 35 years ago, I would spend a good part of Saturday, because I'm due on Sunday, you know, I'd spend a good part of Saturday pulling my hair out, yeah, and reading and rereading and trying to find more and all that kind of thing. And it was pretty miserable Saturdays, just to try to come up with something that I thought was good. And now I'm enjoying coming up with something to say. I'm enjoying it much more, yeah, as I guess in my later years of preaching, to rely more on my own instincts and intuition and what is really most on my mind, and that's where, you know, I might even say I'm trusting in, however you want to say it, the spirit or the universe or whatever. I'm trusting that the things that are most on my mind are important for me to say. You know, so I'm enjoying the whole process a lot more than when I was young. Really counting on intuition and the things that come out of quiet places, and that's, I know we'll get into that in a little bit too, but that's, well, maybe I ought to get into that now, seeing as Ted is here. Part of when people ask me, how did you get involved in all this or decide to become a minister, as a lot of people do ask, you know.
Yes.
And I attribute one of the factors as taking transcendental meditation as a 17-year-old. Yeah. Signing up for this little course down at the library, the public library of Walpole, Massachusetts. And some people were coming through from, it was at the time the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi,
yes,
right? And so they had these little training courses, and some friend of mine in high school said, "Oh yeah, it's pretty good. We went last week. Do you know about that?" And I figured, well, someone else liked it a lot. I'll give it a try, you know. And I guess that was an openness to the idea that there must be a deeper reality out there. So if I went back even further, I would probably say that the church of my origin just, I'd say, had a special feel to it, or an attraction, that I knew something wonderful was going on there too.
What denomination was it?
It was Congregational.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and I was probably mostly the worship, more so than the confirmation class that you take when you're, well, or a bar mitzvah when you're about 12 or 13. Probably more so than whatever I learned in confirmation, of which I remember next to nothing. It was probably the fact that I remembered maybe a great Sunday school teacher, you know, her smile and her welcome, and remembered the minister well also. The minister, just the way he carried himself, the way he greeted people, the way worship happened, something about the music and the, that I must have known even in middle school and high school. You know, there's something deeper here that's attractive, you know, so I felt the inner attraction, yeah. And then, but the TM was something that kind of put me in, I would say, deeper into prayer. The TM experience, because it is a form of prayer, I think. You know, it's chant-like at the time, and I'm sure you know all about it, that you're given a mantra.
Don't tell anyone what yours is.
Right.
Secret, right.
Yes, I started with TM myself. That was my first introduction to meditation.
And don't tell anyone, this is your secret mantra. And then later I read in some big article in the Globe, you know, it's like, well, there's a certain set list, you know. There might be 10 special ones that they just kind of give out according to what they think your personality is, you know. So anyways, over the years, I was a little suspicious of that thing. Don't tell anybody, you know. It's like, oh, come on. You know, if this is a name for God or whatever it is, then I certainly have given it to a lot of people, you know, this particular one. So what I did was, in that shortly thereafter, I went and talked to a monk at a, like a priory or a monastery. In Gloucester. Well, I had been practicing TM, you know, with this mantra, but I went and talked to a monk. I said, look, do Christians meditate? You know, because I said, well, this is Buddhist or Hindu. I didn't know which it was, you know, and so I went and talked to this monk. Figured he'd know. And he said, of course they do, you know. And so I said, well, is there like kind of a mantra thing, you know? Or what? Well, yeah, I mean, we use Latin, we use Hebrew, we use this and that, you know. He says some people say Dominus, some people, you know. And so I said, interesting. So in my college years, I was experimenting with the whole thing. And I didn't stick to just that mantra. I started experimenting with my own words. Yeah, I said, well, that's... And then, of course, you read, who's that famous doctor? You know, the relaxation response. There we go. There we go. Right. So then I read his book. You know, he's like, yeah, you can use the word one. You know, you can pick any word you want, you know. And that is love. And then I started doing Spanish words. Those are great, you know. And amor has the same vowels as shalom.
I never noticed that.
And you can even reduce the mantra, take out the consonants, and you have the a-o. Anyway, so I've experimented with all that over the years and just found it relaxing, centering, you know, grounding. Even though in some ways it's not grounding, it's a bit ethereal. But I guess centering would be the, in the Roman Catholics call it centering prayer, you know, and they, some kind of similar thing happening. So that was a long answer to say that was a big start for me, was deepening my prayer life with regular meditation, especially during my college years. Yeah.
My late uncle, Thomas Keating, was a major...
He was your late uncle personally?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Famous guy.
Yeah, well, and he was the one who really led the popularization of centering prayer as a technique for Christian meditation. And, you know, what you're saying is just completely consistent with that, and the use there of sacred words to keep you coming back to the presence of God in a deepening silence. Yeah. One of the other things that was very interesting to me is you bringing up Benson, and in his early iteration of his work, he said just use one.
Yeah.
And later, many years later, he came to the conclusion, research-based conclusion, that it was a more effective technique if people actually did use a spiritual word for them, and
that makes sense to me.
Yeah,
Gosh.
absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's a little deeper because it's focused on something like Shalom or Domine or Jesu or whatever. I mean, it's got a real focus to it.
And then coming back full circle, one is a very spiritual word.
That's true.
Right.
That's right. Yeah.
Unity. There we go. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Now, reading your bio, you were in college in pre-med and chemistry.
Oh, yeah.
So what's the transformation? What happened?
Well, I guess it's twofold, because the transformation was, as I'm saying, this attraction and this calling, this gradual calling towards a life of meditation and prayer, and some study of Holy Scriptures, etc. But the other part of it, of course, is that I was becoming, I guess, more apathetic about science. I did the chemistry major well, I do say, very well, but I was not passionate about it. I didn't love it, you know? And so when I basically applied I got interviews, I think, at 3 med schools, and I found myself in one of the interviews talking myself out of it. I scratched my head after the interview and said, well, I didn't really want to convince them, you know? So I didn't get accepted to the 3, and so I said, well, do I keep knocking on the door and say, oh, I'll apply again next year, you know? No, I don't want to keep knocking on the door. Some people do, and they eventually get in, you know. But I didn't want to, so I talked myself out of it, and part of that is because, that desire, why do you really want to be a doctor, you know? And probably the best thing I could come up with was something like bedside manner, you know, bedside manner, and it's neat to be with people to help them as best you can. And an experience I had in a nursing home, which ostensibly, or for some, is to get your resume better, you know, to get into med school. I was an orderly in a nursing home, but I think I had very little interest in the medicines they were giving these people. I was interested in talking to them, their life stories. Yeah, exactly. I mean, finding, like you folks are doing, life stories of people, you know, and so I knew, I'm not that interested in the physiology of everything, you know. Well, and figuring that it was extremely disciplined study, that you better darn well really love it. Yeah, and my sister was in the field, so I went to her apartment and looked at all her huge textbooks, and I'm thinking, I don't want to learn all this stuff. You know, I did the chem major because I was good at it, and that's that. It's like I was good at figures and science and graphs and whatever, but I didn't love it.
So talk about study and lots of books and all
Well.
that. What was seminary like?
Just throw away the notes. Very good question. Very good question, yeah. It was challenging, extremely challenging. Yeah, I was never in college. That's why I stuck with math and physics and chemistry and whatever. I could do it, and there wasn't a lot of lengthy reading. I was not a fast reader. I mean, I read with good comprehension, but slowly. I was always a slow reader. And so in college, I did not take hardly any English courses. Sociology, almost zip. History, almost zip. History of religion, zip. I didn't want to read. So how was seminary? I went to my older sister, the doctor, and showed her the Institutes of Calvin. I said, look at what they're wanting us to read. 2 thick volumes of the Institutes of John Calvin. And my sister just looked at him, because she was a brainiac. She just looked at him and said, Ross, you don't have to read every word and this and that. Go to the table of contents, find the main thing, go to the index, look at the main things in the index, read the parts you really want to read, you know. And she helped me study some of it, and I'm sure, I shouldn't admit this, but it's true. If I had to say the percentage of what I studied, read in grad school, it's probably 1/10 of what they assigned, you know? Maybe 1/5 if I was lucky. And then I took really good notes in class. I mean, I was very good. I was more astute by learning this way. So the classroom notes, I got them down. Yeah.
Smart student.
But yeah, that's a good question. All that reading, and yeah, seminary was tough. I was glad when it was over. Yeah.
And what came next?
And then so the ongoing saga. Well, actually, there was a little piece in the middle there that's kind of interesting. I think was when the med school thing went, you know, I said, nah, this isn't for me or whatever. I said, but I better get a job. I just graduated from college, so I better get a job. So actually I don't know if I put it down, but I was very good at Spanish, languages, right? So I had a minor in Spanish in college, all the chemistry and everything, but a minor in Spanish, like 5 semesters. I said, you know what? I could teach, you know, like at a private school, but I don't want to teach chemistry, no, because I didn't like it that much. I liked Spanish. So I said, let me try to teach Spanish. So I applied to private schools, got a job just like that. Went in, I was quite fluent at the time, and just because I liked it. Yeah. So I taught Spanish for 4 years. And then, but the call, there you go, the call kept coming. Because while I was teaching Spanish, I was part of a Presbyterian church 2 blocks away. And it was a big Presbyterian church, and I sang in the choir. And the choir was like a 40 to 50 member choir. Big church, big choir, right? Loved it. Loved the music and this and that. But you know what I did during that time? I was probably the only choir member with the bulletin in one hand and a pen in the other hand. I was taking notes on the sermons. I have like 3 or 4 years of notes from a great preacher.
Wow.
Yeah, well, very good preacher. And you know, I don't know where they are, and I've really never looked at them. Even though I have, like, these were great sermons, and I've got them all stacked up somewhere. But I might have looked at them once or twice, but that's interesting. No, I knew I had to forge my own way.
Yeah.
You know.
And what was essential, what was really meaningful is in there.
Yeah. Forge. So then I knew that after the 4 years of teaching Spanish that I was still being called towards, you know, I think I want to do what that guy's doing. It was a guy at the time. Now it's mostly women. but I want to do what that guy's doing. I understand what he's saying, and I experience a lot of what he's saying. And so it was the calling through another person too. You know, and I'll say one more thing, that when I was in college, here's the people aspect. You know, we experience God through other people. when I was consulting with my hometown pastor, that's who I went to for advice. I'm like, I did this whole pre-med thing, and I love Spanish, but I don't know what I want to do for a career, really, And I told him a little bit about prayer in college, meditation and prayer, and a Christian fellowship. All right, a group of 40, 50 people that sang and prayed. So I'm talking to my hometown pastor, and he actually put the idea in my head. He said, have you ever considered seminary? Now that might not be good counseling, right? A non-directive counselor might say, But he actually popped the question, have you ever considered seminary? And that's when I was like, no. I'm like, are you kidding? Do what you do up front? Are you kidding? And so then it took me the next 4 years to keep considering it. 4 years of teaching.
Yeah.
But his question never left my head. Yeah. Yeah. So that's, yeah.
Well, something that fascinated me reading your bio was that you ended up returning to the sort of church of your youth, congregation.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there were other stops along the way, Presbyterian and then Baptist. And I'm just wondering.
Why do I laugh when you say I'm sorry, but I'm thinking of Southern Baptist. You know, like
I mean, obviously they're all Christian churches, but I'm wondering what that experience was for you to move through that journey, whether there was a kind of compare and contrast, or gee, this church used to do it better than this one, or how was that?
Some of it, it's hard to admit, but was a very practical nature. It really was. Practical being, which one can I go through the hoops, the requirements and the hoops in the either the easiest way or the most practical way that didn't involve 10 extra hoops.
Yeah.
And that meant going back to the church of my origin, because the Presbyterian church was very similar to Congregational. There's no question. It is extremely similar. They're a little more orderly. A little more orderly, and quite frankly, the requirements for ordination were a little stricter. In terms of who's watching, I got to see who's watching this show. Anyways, what do I want to say here? What do I want to admit to? And I'll admit to it. One of them was Bible. They had a lot stricter requirements about knowing the Bible. And quite frankly, the United Church of Christ, I think, traditionally has been a little, or their education part in seminary has been a little lighter on the Bible. A little more experiential, a little more, experiential. And the United Church of Christ is on the very liberal end of Christianity. Some Presbyterian churches are too, but I think they have a lot more in the middle of the road and conservative in the Presbyterian folds. And that means for ordination, you got to know your Bible content really well. And I didn't. Because, in college, it was more the singing and the prayers and the fellowship. Now I would call it community, but the fellowship of the other Christians and, not heavy Bible study. So I went into seminary needing remedial work in the Bible, big time. Yeah, because I didn't know half of what was in there. So,
Not to throw in a very different thread, not so different, but music. I know it's a big part of your life.
Yes, huge.
Yes.
And that's what I mean. It's like my calling and my sustenance and deepening, a lot of it came through music. Right, more so than studying the scriptures to the nth degree. Through music, absolutely. and still is. I often finish a sermon with a song. Yeah, either one that I've written, which is not a lot, but there's 10 or 20 of them, and or some favorite composers, that really speak to the theme, and I will do that as my conclusion. Go to a song, which a lot of the Baptists used to do. They, especially the Black Baptists, would often sing part of the sermon. Yeah, well, you know, Joel, being part of a gospel choir.
Right.
And end with even Barack Obama at a key moment.
Yes, yeah.
What did he do? Break into Amazing Grace. Because you don't know what else to do. You may as well reach, deep in there. Maybe I should mention one thing about, I had a couple notes here on, getting to know God, but yet for me the question is also, why did I stay with the Christian faith, and that's and the inside joke of the United Church of Christ is Unitarians considering Christ.
Oh.
You never heard that one?
No, I haven't.
Well, maybe I shouldn't have shared that. I don't know who's watching it, but that's like an inside joke.
Yeah.
Because maybe it's not a good joke, because it's like, the whole Jesus aspect of our history and worship has not been really focused on, like say in a Baptist church or a Pentecostal church, or and there's not a lot of praise Jesus and that kind of thing. However, many of us we still often say that Christ, or the Spirit of Jesus, or the risen Spirit, or the eternal Spirit, is still the head of the church. So we say Christ's Spirit is head of the church. But anyway, like the point I was going to make was on getting to know God as Great Spirit, or through nature. I mean, the many ways that I'm thinking of things like nature, that is a calling for me too. It is for most everybody. So, but part of my thing in nature is even like saltwater swimming at the ocean. I find so much sense of rebirth, and even the cold waters off of this coast. I push it right up through, hopefully, not Columbus Day, but Indigenous Peoples Day, push the ocean swimming right up through October 12 or 10, and just feel the exhilaration. Talking about a real experience of rebirth and exhilaration, But anyway, so nature aside, and then of course there's things like just that all of us talk about, the beauty of birds and flowers. I mean, they're just so intricate, and so the idea is there must be something greater, or some force that's greater, that organizes something in this world. The intricate flowers, the intricate birds. Anyway, but so that all being said, nature and music, the universal nature of music. So I love the universal things of nature and music, but now I just want to get down to the Christ part, which at this season, Christmas season, we, of course, in the Christian church talk a lot about incarnation. Now, I'm assuming that we're not exclusive in that. I mean, incarnation must be a kind of a theme of many faiths. How does spirit come into body? And maybe I should have watched the whole episode with the body worker. But anyway, because how does spirit come into body? And just saying, so to focus on Jesus himself, regardless of if we get into, is he the unanswerable questions, is he the only Son of God? And I would say, no, we're all children of God, and what part of, was he still different from us? Of course he was different, but, it's so hard to define exactly how I've had arguments with church members over this, where they say he is God, and so I say no, he. It's not that he is God. We say that he fully exemplifies God. So I try to draw a little distinction when somebody says that, and then we get into the Trinity and all that. But the reason I'm bringing up the incarnation or into the flesh is because that's the way God has called me over the years, is through people and through other people. And when I think Joel's question, or the whole question, what uplifts the spirit? Unquestionably being with people that are smiling or laughing, especially humor. To me, humor is a synonym or a close cousin of grace.
Nice.
Absolutely. It's like when anybody has a belly laugh, there is just a release and a sense of, the commonality that we have, even when it's, even when it's, could be embarrassing, or we're vulnerable, or, what do comedians play on? Things that are embarrassing or vulnerable or extreme or whatever. We just have to throw up your hands and laugh. And say, well, this is the way it was. Could you believe that happened? And oh, wow. So I love that aspect of lifting the spirit with other people, small groups and larger groups. Sometimes, boy, I'm talking too much, I know, but I'll let you in a minute. So because I said to this is like a whole sermon, see. I said to myself, well, this, it happens one-on-one so beautifully. And that was one of my experiences of Uplift the Spirit, was good therapy. Good therapy one-on-one. When I was first starting in ministry, I spent 10 years with a great therapist. Yeah. And so that one-on-one sense of trust and warmth, and see the incarnation or the enfleshment of God's love, God's steadfast love, right? Well, it's got to be enfleshed from time to time, Aside from my own meditative times, that's like, say that's solitude, time with God. But boy, a good therapist. And I've, after that, later in my life, I've continued with a spiritual director also, that I've had continually for a long time.
Nice.
And it's such a gift to, I guess we could call them a very good listener. Right?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
A very good listener.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's been a real uplift of spirit. And that, of course, comes in depressed times, crisis times, and I probably won't get into all that here, but I've had my share, of, of heartbreaks in life. And,
We're really in the middle of the holiday seasons, so-called, and I'd just like to talk a little bit about that, both in terms of some of the joyous stuff that comes up, also how for some people who aren't experiencing that, it's kind of very difficult, and then the sort of also the context. I'll speak about the sort of what I understand as I grew up as a Catholic, the kind of traditional context of Advent as a time of introspection and kind of trying to really go deeply into spiritual practice, which tends to get a little glossed over in the hurly-burly of the commercial Christmas. And then, do you want to say kind of what the Hanukkah period is, what that represents in Judaism?
a compliment or something to counterbalance the Christian. It wasn't a major holiday as it's observed.
It was
today.
not.
Right, that's real spirited. We gotta have something. These guys are having all this fun. Come on. But no, it's two things. It's a military victory.
Yeah, it was.
And the 8 days is about the oil that was available after they got back into the temple and wanted to light the internal light was only good for 1 day, but it lasted for 8 days. So they added a very strong spiritual element that, you know, there's a gift that's given to us by
A miracle,
God.
really.
A miracle.
A miracle of oil.
Right. So those two factors. But for all spiritual paths at the time of darkness, which is what we're
Right.
talking about, shortest days of the year, something to lift the spirit to get through that time.
Yes, absolutely, yeah. And that's where we go in the Christian church every Christmas Eve. Is a candle lighting ceremony in most churches, and we have a large space, so we can actually make one big circle, maybe a second one, but usually just one, around our space, and pass the flame from person to person. Very symbolic. But yeah, and the other thing about light and time of darkness, well, I think to answer your question, Advent, the time
Yes.
of preparing, and darkness, yeah, it's all a construct. The Christian year is all a construct.
Yes.
There's no godly reason why Lent and Advent should be so solemn, you know, because nobody even knows when Jesus was born. You know, it's like, it could have been during the winter solstice, it could have been at another time, nobody really knows. Maybe some mystics know, I don't know. But it's all a construct that, I mean, it's still good, but why did they pick 4 weeks of Advent instead of 6? Doesn't make any sense. Okay, if we're leading up to Easter in Lent, why not make that a 4-weeker, you know, rather than a 6-weeker? Well, I guess it has to do with the number 40 or something, yeah, or the 40 weeks maybe of Jesus was in the wilderness for 40 days and 40 nights or something. So, and that, as we know, is all through the Bible, yeah, all through the scriptures. But I still see it as a construct, you know, and so, but it says to me that universally we always have to look at the dark side of a lot of light, not just in those seasons.
Yes.
Right, but we have to be honest about it. And I've noted over the years, I think the best preachers are always honest about struggles in life and realities of life, you know, and when you're a guest preacher, sometimes you can share a whole lot about your own personal struggles, whatever. When you're there with the same people every week, you can't do that. For many reasons, but whatever, you know, it's like, so going from dark to light, being honest about it all, but, you know, I see the celebration of Hanukkah, this light in the world, candlelight, there is a similarity of a miracle of light, and in the Christian church, I'm back to talking about God and Jesus both. We certainly know that God is, well, we assign to God the characteristics of goodness and light and peace and all those wonderful characteristics. And yet in the Christian church, we go further and we assign mostly all of them to Jesus also, you know, and talk about every Christmas Eve. It's in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was light also. So it's right in that beginning of the Gospel of John, where we talk about Jesus as the light of the world. But the incarnation piece is when Jesus clearly said on the Sermon on the Mount, you are light for the world, you are salt for the world. So I find that fascinating. It's like, okay, God is light, Jesus is light, but you are the light of the world, Jesus said. Okay, so interesting. We all are supposed to enflesh this light or this radiance. You know, all of us. You are the light of the world, he said, and the salt of the for the world, or yeah. So anyway, that gives me uplift sometimes to study the life of Jesus, study his teachings, and just do the best we can to emulate his way and his presence. Do the best we can. We'll never make a pure light, or what we consider to be his pure light, at least through the ages.
Something that I'm hearing fairly frequently is the first is that Christ is not Jesus' last name.
Yeah.
And then the other is putting on the mind of Christ from Paul, and that it kind of resonates with the sort of centering prayer notion of the divine indwelling, that there is God, or we are part of God, and that God does dwell within us.
Dwell within.
And that putting on the mind of Christ is to bring that into the world.
Have this mind among you that was in Christ Jesus. Yeah. And be not conformed to the world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind. So there is a lot of the mental focus too. Even though my prayer history is more trying to go a little beyond the mental focus into a more peaceful, I wouldn't want to say vacuous, though that's the danger, I guess, but into a more peaceful thing that goes beyond words. Is that kind of what you again?
Beyond words, but into action. I mean, there's someone in a centering prayer group that I'm in online who has really influenced me, actually, because he's talking about it, putting on the mind of Christ and bringing that into all the interactions that he has. Seeing Christ in each person that he meets. And
absolutely.
Recognizing when that breaks down and he reacts to it and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
That just seems like a wonderful spiritual discipline.
Absolutely, yeah. See Christ in every person that you meet.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that goes along with one of the famous scriptures that it was the one about the visiting the poor and food for the hungry and this and that. Even when you did it to the least of one of these, my brothers and sisters, you did it unto me. Yeah, that's a famous one of Jesus' parables or whatever.
Yeah.
And I know that you're very interested, I mentioned before, interfaith.
Oh, yeah.
So
Yeah.
the term namaste from the Hindu tradition, I salute the divinity within you from the divinity within me.
Yeah.
And
Namaste. There you go, namaste. There you go.
And you were talking quite a bit before about fellowship, community, how we touch each other. So that light, the mind of Jesus that we can bring forth, touches wherever we go.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, let me follow up on that briefly. We've had Anna Smolowitz come and speak to us on Sunday morning, a couple times at least, give a little sermon, and just finding leaders of other faiths who exude light, and she talked to us about Hanukkah, and I also, as you know, participate often, once in a while anyway, in the Monday night study group at the synagogue, and I'm beginning to see why it's such a close fellowship, because people, it's a fellowship. Do I dare use that word, fellowship?
Sure.
Community.
Yeah.
It's a masculine biased word, right? anyway, but I begin to see the close connections that everyone has. And that may be based on common history, fine. But after a while, it's more than just common history. That's part of it. The God or the same God, but it's also what has happened over the years. Yeah, of getting to know one another and you sense the personalities. Yeah, yeah. A lot of love shared. Yeah. Love and light. Yeah.
We're reaching the end of our time. I was going to ask you if there anything else on your list there that you want to be sure to tell us here.
Particularly around suggesting to others how they can lift their spirit.
Oh gosh, so many ways. I had, oh my gosh, I had one thing that really stood out to me. I did a marriage a few years ago where the bride didn't want to say much about God. This has happened to me several times. Well, do you have to mention God? All right, well, we're getting married, and you came to me as a minister. But anyway, one thing they did was they brought up a poet from New Hampshire by the name of Don Hall. Do you know that poet? Anyway.
No.
And he had something in his writings about marriage called The Third Thing. Interesting.
Yes.
And it became, for me, a very spiritual wedding based on their poetry. The third thing means focusing outside of ourselves and not two people just focusing on each other, but what's the third thing? Is it your dog, that you're both taking for a walk? Is it that you both love singing in the choral society? The third thing, what is your mission or your third focus? And that to me is a universal calling, I think, of God, the third thing, something outside ourselves. Yeah,
Yes,
so I thought that was neat. Find a third thing.
Yeah.
With my wife and I, it's our puppy. He's bringing him everywhere. Doing okay, all right. So, and then I have that under the incarnate thing too. Children and puppies and play. Talk about lifting the spirit.
Yes.
How couldn't you laugh a little and have fun when you have a little puppy jumping all over you, licking your face and whatever, or greeting you at the door with the tail just going 100 miles an hour? Oh, I'm so happy to see you. Oh my God. Anyways, so that's that. I think we've covered most of this. Just laughter and smiles and one more thing, the word grace. Yeah.
Yes.
Which Paul Tillich, I guess, had a very famous sermon where he just summed it up. He's very experiential, right? He summed it up as, accept that you are accepted. Accept the fact that you are accepted.
Yeah.
Okay, that's an interesting way to explain
Yes.
it. Yeah. But, and more and more, we try to do that in our church community, of course, but we always fall short. And everyone wants to feel welcome, feel the warmth, feel acceptance, feel not judged. That other piece of it, non-judgmental if possible. But and that is an uplift of the spirit, of course, to be accepted for wherever we are at.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing so richly about your life and your views and what helps people. I just want to put a plug in, going back to music. You have the Roots Music Series, which really uplifts people's spirits. So I encourage people to keep an eye out for what's coming next at Belleville.
Thank you. Yeah. A lot of great music, and I'll put in a plug for all gospel music everywhere. And the Roman Catholic Church is having, I guess, a gospel concert on January, I think, 6th or 7th. Somewhere, a Sunday afternoon, 7th.
Yeah.
There we go. They're having a gospel concert from a group from Boston.
Wow.
Yeah, just,
Great.
just gospel music, even if you don't agree with every point of the theology or every word, tends to be very lively and very soulful.
Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Definitely uplifting.
Yeah.
Ross, this
Thank
was
you.
really a pleasure. Thank you for
Thank
coming in and talking with us today.
Well, thank you for inviting me. Yeah.
And thank you, watchers and listeners, for being with us, and look forward to our next month's presentation, whatever that might be, and tune in again.
Amen.